We are seeing more cocaine. Definitely the heroin and the prescription drugs out of control.
The last few years there's been a dramatic increase in opiate use. That includes prescription painkillers, leading to heroin, and snorting heroin, and then shooting heroin.
I think the biggest right now is your prescription drugs, and just things you would never think twice about. But the old drugs that were so strong that most of us never saw are so prevalent also, like heroin. Kids are getting cocaine. Our kids have more money than we did when we were younger. And the designer drugs, you know, they have beautiful names. Ecstasy. You know, who doesn't want to feel that way?
Did what you just hear surprise you? Well, it shouldn't. The drugs that kids are using today are much different than they were just a few years ago. Good morning, I'm Janet Snyder, and today on Western New York Living, we're going to take a look at teen drug use right here in Western New York. As many of you know, the 22nd annual Kids Escaping Drugs Telethon will be taking place tonight from 4 to 11 p.m. right here on Channel 2. Kids Escaping Drugs recently gathered a group of moms together at West Seneca West High School to discuss the problems kids are facing today. One of the first questions they addressed was, what are the early signs your son or daughter may have a drug problem?
What is one piece of advice that our campus moms would have for any parent watching?
These kids that my son was involved with, they slept at my house, they ate at my house, they spent holidays at my house, they called me mom, and they were all doing the same thing. So no matter how well you think you know these kids, you do not. Because if somebody came to me and said, these kids you're allowing to stay in your house has been seen on the east side buying drugs, I would have defended them to the bitter end. And you know what? Including my son, they lived on the east side. I got the phone calls, Mom, I'm at so-and-so's house, we're eating dinner, I'll be home in a couple hours. They were on the east side. So you don't know the kids as well as we think we know them, and I would have bet my life that not one of these kids ever touched a drug. They were all doing it, every one of them.
As a health teacher, that's what I hear all the time. Tell your parents you're sleeping over at so-and-so's house. I hear it probably once every 2 weeks, that they'll, you know, we'll tell them we're sleeping over and we'll do this, or we'll tell them sleeping over, we'll worry about it later. But that's used a lot.
I think a lot of times as parents we forget the things that we got away with in high school, or our friends got away with in high school, and for some reason we think, no, that'll never happen because we're smarter than them. So, and we fall into that trap.
You said before about how get receipts, things like that. I have 3 teenagers and 1 up and coming, and I've checked, you know, I check their email periodically. I always check the computer history. I've found my daughter is harder than my boys, probably because she's a girl, but she tends to argue with me. You know, my privacy, and I always tell her, you know, you don't have any privacy. You're 16 years old, and that's a big thing in our house, because I don't know if I'm one of the only parents that do that, and that's why, or if it's just because the kids don't talk about it. But when is it not their privacy? I mean, I don't want to wait until there's a problem. I want to know now.
Is there anything that you can do to be proactive rather than reactive? Because we're talking a lot about, okay, when you notice a change, and is there such a thing as being proactive in this type of situation?
I don't really think there's anything you can do if your child wants to experiment with drugs. They will find a way to do it. Before I came to this panel today, I asked my daughter, who has just succeeded in 2 years clean and sober, thank you very much. This past January, she's doing extremely well. She spent 11 months at the Renaissance campus. If you would have told me 5 years ago that I would be sitting on a panel here, I would have thought I would win the lottery before that would happen.
You hear that, and it's scary stuff, isn't it? Joining me now is Jody Altman from the Renaissance campus and Dick Gallagher from Kids Escaping Drugs. I have to say that as a parent hearing all of that, you know, you think, not my child, and that's probably the scariest part of all. Let's start, Jody, with early signs, because we're going to be talking about kids escaping drugs all day today. Tell me what kind of signs we should look for.
Anything that's not what you normally see with your child. Their clothing changes, their attitude changes, their friends change. Anything that you don't see on a normal basis with your child is something you need to pay attention to. It doesn't mean they're using drugs every time, but it means something's going on and you need to ask the question.
Well, and I think it's hard too, because as kids go from, say, middle schoolers to high school, they begin to mature, and so their personalities change just because they're growing up.
Sure.
But then I think it's hard to decide, are they growing up or are they getting into bad things? You know what I mean?
And that's a tough thing. And as a parent, you need to ask the questions. You need to be aware of who they're with and what they're doing, and you need to ask questions. Whether they tell you to ask them or not, because they'll tell you not to, you need to ask the questions and you need to pay attention.
Okay, my good friend Dick Gallagher, I know you've worked with so many teens across Western New York. What's the first thing you want parents to know? Well,
I think they have to be much more aware, much more diligent related to what the kids are doing, who they're hanging with, when the signs are pretty much out there if they're looking, and they have to have conversations. Communication can be hi-bye, I'm going somewhere, but they have to have the conversation related to drugs and alcohol and where they're going and who they're with. I think what's really tragic today in the last couple of years has been a tremendous increase, as the piece indicated, as far as the spike in the opiates, particularly prescription drugs and heroin. And when you look at the devastation of what these drugs are doing to our youth, people have to understand that it doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone. And when you look at this bottle is 100 pills, hydrocodone, to be filled 4 times, 500 pills. Okay. Now, in the low end, $5 a pill, this bottle is worth $2,500. On the high end, it's $20 a pill. It's worth $10,000. The gentleman that got this got it off the internet. All he had to do was show proof that he had surgery, was able to get it from a doctor in Louisiana. The parents have to understand that it's affordable, it's available, and accessible. No one is immune, and they have to be looking for the signs, and they have to be communicating.
Okay, I know you're both going to stay with us throughout the half hour, and I know we can learn a lot, so together we will. Jody and Dick will stay with us to answer a lot more questions, but when we come back, we are going to hear some interesting comments from our mom-to-mom panel as they discuss what schools should be doing to help teens today. And remember, you can go to KED.org anytime if you have any concerns that your child may have a drug problem. They're here to help you. Also, we'll have a lot more information for you on the Kids Escaping Drugs Telethon, which is happening tonight from 4 to 11 p.m. right here on Channel 2. It's worth it. Please stay with us.